What's going on, college football fans? Welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. I am your co-host, as always, joined by my co-host Mason. Welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. If you're new here, we hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button, coming and hanging out with us. We're having a great time here in the 2024 college football season. Today we are giving you our previews and predictions for all the biggest games. That's every Tuesday, preview and prediction time. And it's Tuesday night, so it is time for those predictions. We got some big matchups here in week 10, and that's what we're going to go over today. If you missed our show on Sunday, we touched on a lot of the, I guess you could call them secondary matchups or other matchups that had to do with maybe not the national picture, but conference picture, regional picture, things like that. And you guys have been watching and commenting on those, so I certainly do appreciate it. If you're watching today, throw your comments in the comment section. Let us know what you think about these games that we're going to be breaking down today. What's your prediction? I'd like to know what your score predictions are. We're going to give you ours, so I think it's only fair that you put them in the comment section, right? And if you enjoy the video, or even if you don't, how about you hit that thumbs up button for us and help us try to get the word out here about First and Long. We're an up-and-coming channel, and thanks to all of you viewers, listeners, however you consume the show, we are growing slowly but surely, and thumbs up just goes a long, long way in helping us out with that. All right, there's all the introduction stuff. Mason, how you doing, man? We're very busy at the beginning of the week here at First and Long, making sure that we get our thoughts out early for the listeners to be able to get money in the betting window or just a first listen at what's going on in the upcoming week. We're in week 10, man. It's hard to believe. We've done this at least 10 times this season. I guess really 11. Here we go again, brother. How you doing?
Man, doing good. We got some good football games to talk about tonight. Gonna be a good weekend just in general. You know, we covered 5 matchups on Sunday night show. We've got another 4 for y'all tonight. We're gonna start off with the big boy in Ohio State versus Penn State. Then moving over to the SEC with the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. That is what it's called. Don't try to sway me any other way. That is the name. We've been there. We've enjoyed that cocktail party very much so. So excited to talk about that one. We got Louisville and Clemson. Should be a pretty good game, I think. Another game that I think is going to shape up the ACC as well. We've got Pitt versus SMU, undefeated Pitt team, the staunch Pitt Panthers. This year in the ACC. We're gonna talk about that. I've been pretty hard on Pitt, so going in and watching them. Did it change my opinion? Maybe not, but we'll talk about them anyways. Excited to get into this with you, Mark.
Yep, got some good ones indeed. Let's get going on this thing. First of all, we're going to go out to Happy Valley. It's a Big Ten matchup, and it's one that everybody in college football or around college football is very, very familiar with. Ohio State has been a speed bump that Penn State has not been able to get over in a while, Mason. And if you look at Penn State over the last few years, they've really handled their business in every single game, in every single scenario, just about over the last few years, other than when they're facing Ohio State or they're facing Michigan. Ohio State, on the other hand, they've had their problems with Michigan, and that's what's been keeping them at bay. This is two very different teams, I feel like, this season. Now, Penn State, I feel like, is similar to what we've seen in the past as far as offensively, and we got to talk about some injuries and stuff for each of these teams going into this matchup. I think that's going to be something that's going to play a factor. Unfortunately, as college football fans, we love to see these teams, when they're at their healthiest, and that's not going to be the case for either one of these teams going into this football game, regardless of whether or not some of these guys make it back for the matchup or they don't. Can Ohio State's offensive line get healthy enough to win this football game, Mason? That's really kind of what it keeps popping into my head. And we're going to kind of look at some of the injuries there, and maybe that's a decent enough place to start, honestly. and I'll get us to the right slide here in a second. But a lot of injuries here, Mason. And this was a group that we talked about in the offseason as it wasn't the strength of the offense. Let's just say that. We didn't think the starting group was bad necessarily, but there was some questions coming off of the last couple of seasons. I don't think it's been the strong suit for Ohio State necessarily, but Josh Simmons out for the season, right? Donovan Jackson is going to have, he moved over in this past game to play left tackle. Now, look, I want to say this before I unpack all this. This is subject to change here. This offensive line, the way things have been mixed up, and in particular, Donovan Jackson going over to left tackle, we might see a little something different this Saturday than what I'm predicting here. But I'm just going off based off of what Ohio State has done, in the last game or two, filling in for some of these guys. And Coach Day said it himself that, we'll reevaluate this week, right? And we'll see who's healthy enough to play where. But left tackle is a big concern, Mason. Josh Simmons out for the season. Mikowski went out this past week. That was the backup at left tackle, which that's what prompted Donovan Jackson to scoot over there to left tackle. Luke Montgomery, he was the backup right guard, looking like he's going to probably move to left guard there unless, like I said, something kind of changes. So a lot of mixing and matching going on here on the offensive line here in the 10th week of the season for Ohio State. I'm interested to see if this group is going to be able to it's a gut check. This is gut check Saturday for this group. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, we've talked about this offensive line. We've honestly been berated about it online a couple of times in the preseason. People saying that, we need to do our homework. We don't know what we're talking about with this offensive line. Whether that was right, wrong, or indifferent, at this point, this offensive line is a shell of what it was, and we already didn't think it was like top 10 group in the country or anything. So with this offense wanting to run the football like they want to run the football, I think this is a concern. What do you think?
Yeah, even healthy, this team has struggled to run the football. The past two games, I don't think they cleared 75 yards on the ground, which is just a shame considering the stable of backs that you have, in particular, Judkins and Henderson, two of the best running backs in the country. Now that you're injured on the offensive line, that can't be a good thing, right? You're presumably your best offensive lineman in your left tackle, and Simmons goes down. You have to replace him. Now, Ohio State recruits very well. They haven't been as good at recruiting the offensive line room as some other units for sure, but nonetheless, you don't just replace your starting left tackle. Not like no team in the country really just has backups ready to go. Now you kick your left guard down, and he plays tackle. Looks like you're going to move another interior offensive lineman over to play the left guard spot. But I do think that this is a huge storyline for this game. Going up against Penn State's defensive line is a tall task, even for this starting group. I don't think that they would have a ton of success, even if everybody were healthy in the screen on your picture here. So I don't feel good about this offensive line. I'll tell you that. Healthy or not, I think that this was a concern going into the season, and in particular in this football game, going up against a very physical Penn State defensive front. It doesn't bode well for the rushing attack, and I think that whoever rushes the ball better in this football game is probably going to end up being the one who wins it, as these games have been very physical in years past.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's don't go to Penn State there. My bad. I wanted to look at some of the stats here offensively for this group. Look, Mason, Will Howard is having his best season he's ever had statistically, and I don't think it's any wonder. I mean, look at where he's at. Look at the situation around him with the skill players. You can see some of the stats. It hasn't been the most explosive offense, right? And I don't think anybody described Will Howard coming out of Kansas State as this is the most explosive quarterback or anything like that. So some of it, I think a little bit by design, but with the way that this offensive line is struggling, I think that Ohio State has got to figure out a way to get behind some defenses. You're going to have to take some chances in this football game. And that is assuming that offensive line that we just referenced is able to protect Will Howard. Now, the best pass rusher on Penn State's defense that went down this past game. So we'll talk about that here in a second, and that's Dennis Sutton. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. But I think you've got to be able to hit some explosive plays in this football game to be able to back this Penn State defense off. Because if you're Penn State and you're looking defensively, how do you attack this offense? They've watched the film over the last couple of weeks. They see what's going on with this offensive line, and I would not be surprised at all if we don't see Penn State bring the heat in this football game. So, with that being said, I think there's going to be opportunities for these amazing wide receivers that Ohio State's got. Emeka Ibuka, obviously, Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith's actually your leading receiver, and I implore you to go look at some of his stats. I mean, they're really secondary to hardly anybody as far as wide receivers in the country. Touchdown in every single game this season. This guy's the real deal, man. Jeremiah Smith is the real deal. And everything that I'm going to say on this preview and prediction, I got to preface with the fact that Jeremiah Smith could just bust this thing wide open if Will Howard is able to hit a couple of them, a couple of passes to him. So Ohio State has absolutely got the potential to bust this thing wide open if they show up and play their best offensive game of the year. Now, that's not the way this offense has been trending here of late, Mason, but here's some of the numbers for the year as a whole. You can kind of compare these numbers to last season's Ohio State, and definitively 2024, the offense has been better than in 2023. And a lot of that had to do with the quarterback play. What are your thoughts on this offense? What does this offense need to do in this football game? We've kind of glanced over it a little bit with the offensive line, but what is the key here to victory for Ohio State if they're going to beat Penn State? And we'll kind of talk about the defense here in just a second, and we'll make our way over to Penn State. But offensively, like I said, I think they got to be able to hit a shot play or two, and I think that's going to be really important. But this offense is moot without being able to run the football, don't you think?
Yeah, it's not. It hasn't looked like a traditional Chip Kelly offense in the past couple of weeks. Chip Kelly has historically leaned on the run game throughout his coaching career. He's had some really good running backs, good running quarterbacks. I think Will Howard is kind of fits that mold in a sense, but he's going to have to do some things with his arms. I just feel like Ohio State is going to struggle once again to run the football in this game, considering who they're going up against. And so if you're passing the ball through the air, at a higher rate than normal, then my question is, can Will Howard do it without having any mistakes? We've seen in these big matchups throughout the year that it really comes down to who makes fewer mistakes. Right, that team typically wins the game. We've seen Penn State come away with some big interceptions. We saw it last week against Wisconsin. They had a pick six there in Wisconsin's side of the field, and I wonder what Will Howard is going to do in this football game to limit those errors and those mistakes. Will Howard is a guy who comes from Pennsylvania, didn't get a look from Penn State. He's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, I think, in this game, going back home to play in Pennsylvania. What kind of headspace is he in? Is he going to play too emotional and try to make big plays, or does it give him the spark that he needs to start going more over the top and hitting some of these very talented wide receivers down the field? I think it's a very intriguing matchup. The wide receivers for Ohio State versus the back end of the defense for Penn State. But like you said, if you're not running the football in some capacity, at least moving the chains, running the football and creating some third and shorts, the pass game is just not going to have a ton of success. So at the end of the day, in this type of game, you can't run the football for under 100 yards, and so I think that you got to find a way to get some space, get some holes created for the running backs, and then take the shots down the field. This offense is more than capable of doing that. They've got the playmakers to do it. I'm concerned about that offensive line up front.
Defensively for Ohio State in this game, I feel like this is it's not a stretch to say this is a defensive led football team, at least for the last couple of weeks, right? I mean, here's my big question about this defense because look at the numbers. I mean, there's nothing really to pick on with these numbers, guys. There's nothing outside of the top 20 statistically for this defense. Jim Knowles has done an outstanding job since really year 2 on, and it seems like it continues to get better and better. And I like Jim Knowles' approach of trying not to blitz a whole lot to be able to just generate pressure with the guys that you typically would bring on any given play. And that's the goal of every coach, right? You want your base defense to be able to create pressure. That's what every coach wants. But in big games, Jim Knowles has not been one to dial up pressure. And I'm really interested to see if he can dial up some pressure in this one. And that I think putting pressure on the quarterback is going to be a huge key to success for this. If Ohio State wants to win this football game here, you've got to be able to get after the quarterback, create some havoc plays. You don't necessarily have to get the quarterback on the ground, but I think you need some tackles for loss. You got to get Penn State behind the chains. That's going to go a long way in making that offense sputter. Get them behind the chains, and you've got to be able to just create havoc in some way, shape, form, or another. What do you think about the defense? There's nothing to pick on, in my opinion. I mean, they've done their part pretty much all season as far as look at the point totals for this year. 11.9 points per game for the season. That's 4th in the country. Not much to pick on here.
No, and the personnel is all there. I mean, they've got all the pieces on defense. Anxious to see if Ransom is going to be back to play in this game. That's an injury that I think I feel like Ohio State should be able to overcome. But I mean, he's a huge piece of the back end of this defense and a leader, no doubt, for this unit. A guy who probably could have gone to the NFL if he wanted to last year. So having him obviously hurts, or not having him would obviously hurt. I'd be surprised if we don't see him at some point in this game. But Caleb Downs on the back end of the defense is potentially the best safety in college football. We saw more of that last week, and seeing him come up and make some plays. The defensive line has played pretty well. I think that they've been really good against the run. I need to see a little bit more of a pass rush, I think, from them. They've probably been a little bit underwhelming by my perspective, at least. So want to see them, like you said, get a little bit more of a pass rush against Penn State in this football game. But Jim Knowles has done a phenomenal job since coming in 2022. This now his 3rd season with the defense, and boy, it is a much different looking unit than we've seen from Ohio State prior to Jim Knowles coming in, and really has surpassed the offense even at this point. That's has more to do with the offense not playing as well without C.J. Stroud, but nonetheless, Jim Knowles, you got to tip your cap to this guy because he's done a phenomenal job here with this defense, and now you're looking to this defense to go out and win you a football game against Penn State.
Absolutely. And they've been pretty good against Penn State over the last few years. Let's talk about that Penn State team. Andy Kotelnicki makes his appearance in Happy Valley for the first time here in 2024. And I've seen some improvement with this offense, Mason. If specifically yards per pass attempt, this was a team last year that hovered around 5 or 6 yards per pass attempt last year. And at one point this season, we're around 12. But now kind of settled down to about that 9.9 range. which is 5th in the country. That is really, really good stuff. This offense is getting the ball down the field at a better rate than what we've seen in years past. And honestly, I feel like they're doing more with less because I'm not overly impressed with the wide receiver room just in general. Obviously, some high spots, some low spots, but not very deep at all. And not a ton of just proven talent, guys that have just been, thrown to a ton in their careers or anything like that. Now, obviously, tight end is a whole different situation in this offense, as Warren has had a really, really nice season and has been kind of a do it all Swiss Army knife type offensive player for this offense, blocking, catching, snapping, throwing. He can do it all. And I fully expect the offense to center around him this week. But what would we be talking about if we didn't talk about the all ever polarizing position of quarterback? Drew Aller left last week's matchup at Wisconsin just before halftime. Emerged from the locker room to start the second half, but he wasn't able to go. Knee brace on, all that good stuff. Bo Pribula led 2 touchdown drives in the second half to complete the comeback over Wisconsin. So I guess it begs the question, who's playing quarterback? What are your thoughts? Have you heard anything this week as far as, are we going to be able to get Drew Aller back? Because obviously there's a reason Drew Aller is starting over Pribula. Now, we've seen Pribula come in certain situations with this offense throughout the season, but it's a whole different thing if you're starting and you're running the offense in complete, in totality. I would think that the offense is going to rely heavily on these 2 really good running backs and Mr. Warren. What are your thoughts as far as who's playing quarterback this week and what the offense needs to do to be able to be successful against the absolutely just strangling defense of Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, the injury to Aller could not come at a worse time. This is the game that you circle every year on your schedule, especially this year with no Oregon, no Michigan for Penn State to play this year. You're really putting in all the chips on the table for this game, and it does have that magnitude. It's a top 5 matchup. So tough situation for Nittany in this offense. But I would say that I don't know that there's a ton of drop off between Drew Aller and Pribula, just from a skill set, vantage point, I guess. Looking at what Pribula did coming into the Wisconsin game, I was pretty impressed with him. It seemed like he knew where he wanted to go with the football. Seemed like he was protecting the football really well. I would be surprised. That being said, I would be surprised if Drew Aller doesn't play in this football game in some shape or form. It seems like the injury was minor. That Aller faced. We saw him walking on the sidelines, and we saw him, cheering his team on. It didn't seem like he was too ginger on that knee there. So I feel like he's going to play. But at the same time, when you look at from a prep standpoint, you've got to have both of these quarterbacks ready in this football game, regardless, right? So going into the week, I'm a little bit concerned about what about the reps that they're getting and things like that. Now you're splitting reps between you're splitting reps between quarterbacks with the number 1 offense. So how does that affect the team and the game prep? That's more of the issue for me. But it does sound like Drew Aller has been playing. I believe he practiced today. I mean, heck, I wasn't there, but it sounded like, based on what Franklin was saying, it sounded like he was going to be prepared to practice today, practice on Wednesday, and both quarterbacks would be getting reps with this offense. I think that they're both going to go. I don't know how long Drew Aller is going to be able to stand up in this game, and if he plays the whole game, I kind of like their chances on offense. But at the same time, like I said, with Pribula coming in, I don't feel like there's a ton of drop off between the two.
Well, let me ask you something. So last week, right tackle Anthony Donko didn't play in the second half. Did you hear anything about his status when you were listening to the press conference? Because obviously your starting right tackle going out is an issue. Behind him, you've got the former Wisconsin player and transfer Nolan Rucci, who was highly sought after and a guy that was rated highly coming out of high school. But you heard anything about him just out of curiosity? And
I
what
haven't.
does what? Okay, it doesn't sound like he's going to be able to play, from what I understood. It didn't look good. So, just what does Penn State got to do to win this football game offensively? Because I they're hamstrung, man. Just like
Mhm.
Ohio State, I feel like we got two hamstrung offenses here.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the injury report, actually, Penn State has more than double the amount of banged up players. Now they're all listed as questionable. Some of these guys, you can't really trust an injury report on a Tuesday night, going into a Saturday game. But I think offensively, Penn State has got to continue to take shots downfield. They've been much more explosive when you look at what they did in 2023 versus what they're doing in 2024. We haven't seen a team transform themselves in their explosivity quite like we've seen from Penn State this season. I think that that's got to be a part of the game plan for sure. You've got two capable running backs, but running straight head on into this defensive front for Ohio State is not necessarily, or at least has not been, a winning game plan and winning formula for teams in recent years. So I think you get those two running backs some plays in space. We've seen both of them be pretty proficient in the passing game. So get them out wide a little bit. And I think really, I mean, I like what Nicky's been doing. I think from a scheme standpoint, he's been pretty phenomenal. And really, Penn State just has to keep doing what they've been doing and protect the football on top of all that.
We talked about the Ohio State defense, and I'm really interested to see. I mean, because Coach caught some flack after the game against Oregon about not bringing more pressure against Dylan Gabriel. Excuse me, y'all. I'm over here eating beef jerky for some reason, like an idiot. But are they going to bring pressure on this offense? Do you hang back? That's I'm really interested to see because obviously, if they bring some pressure, that should create some opportunities on the back end. But I'm interested to see if either one of these quarterbacks are able to capitalize on it. And I'm interested to see what Ohio State's defense looks like whenever they're bringing five or six bodies. I don't really know what that looks like this year. We haven't really seen it a whole lot. And Georgia is somebody that we can kind of talk about and think about that didn't do that either all season. And then all of a sudden they go to Texas and they pull this out of their bag where it's like, oh, yeah, we can pass rush, by the way. And so, not to say Ohio State hasn't been able to pass rush, but you get what I'm saying. Um, Defensively for this Penn State group, Tom Allen took over this season after Manny Diaz obviously took over and has really kind of just taken Duke and ran with it right after Coach Elko had some success there last year. So kudos to him. But I feel like the defense has done a good job of really not really skipping a beat for the most part. You see some of these stats statistically, this team has looked really good. There's been a couple of games where you might could point to maybe Bowling Green, so just some couple little hiccups here and there that every single team in college football has went through at this point. So that's not unique to Penn State. Overall, this has been a good defense. Again, I hate to keep talking injuries. I hate it, but Danny Dennis Sutton goes down last week, tries to make his reemergence in the second half, and isn't able to do so. So this is a guy that leads the team with 21 QB hurries this season, and it makes me kind of think that Penn State may have a little bit different of an approach than what I was talking about for Ohio State. Maybe it's time to kind of hang back and play a little bit conservative defensively and make Ohio State prove that they're going to be able to run the ball behind this offensive line, and kind of hang back and try not to let those really awesome special, skilled players, wide receivers and things like that get behind your defense. it's been a good defense this season for Penn State. They're going to need a really good performance this week. Probably going to need to get some turnovers as well. What do you think, Mason? What do they need to do defensively here?
Well, I mean, they have played really well as a unit all season long, but make no doubt about it, this is the best offense that they faced all year. When you look at from a matchup perspective, Ohio State's going to show you something different. I mean, nobody's going into this football game showing what they've shown all year. I mean, you save some of your best stuff for games like this. So I'm curious to see what the adjustments are for Tom Allen. If Ohio State's coming out and just gashing them for plays down the field, what does that look like? I mean, can you rush three with this defensive front and expect them to bring pressure without giving up a ton of plays in the running game? Without Danny Dennis Sutton, I don't know that you necessarily trust that. So I think you gotta dedicate four up front. And then, as far as what you do with the linebackers, that's where I think that Penn State can get pretty creative as far as what they bring, what they show from the line of scrimmage versus, what the actual defense is. I think Tom Allen has a ton of weapons at his disposal. How he uses those, I think we're going to see something different this week than we've seen from Penn State all season.
Absolutely, man. Well, all there's left to do now is predict what we think is going to happen here in this one. This is a huge matchup, obviously, as far as Big Ten is concerned, and you know, I feel like playoff elimination game is a phrase that's been overused already at times, but we're starting to get into the season, the part of the season where that phrase is going to be used accurately. And honestly, Mason, this isn't necessarily a playoff eliminator, but it almost is for Ohio State. Because if Ohio State loses this game, what wins are they going to have at the end of the season to be able to hang their hat on? I mean, the Michigan win at this point, and that's assuming that Ohio State's able to get over that hump this year. Um, that win doesn't have a whole lot of weight to it at this point. Michigan's been a very disappointing team thus far. Um, so this is kind of a last call, in my opinion, for Ohio State. And I think you're going to get this team. I think they're going to play like it, and I think they know that. If you have any hope of making a Big Ten championship, you got to win this football game. Um, I, I have to see Penn State win one of these, Mason, before I'm going to be able to pick Penn State. It hasn't mattered if it's been at Penn State. It hasn't mattered if it's been on the road. Ohio State's owned this series, and while I think this is going to be a very close game, I'll take Ohio State by 3 in this one. And I think it's going to be a really low scoring football game. The over under set at 47.5, so that's not some kind of hot take or anything like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't end up seeing this game like, 20-17 or something like that. That wouldn't surprise me a bit in this football game. It's going to look like an old school Big Ten football game, in my opinion. Give me Ohio State to win it. Give me Penn State to cover. I don't think I'll actually be betting any money on this game. I think there's too many unknown factors here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State has absolutely owned this series, especially as of late. They're on the longest winning streak of the series at 7 right now. If they can win this weekend, that will make it 8. I'm kind of with you, Mark. I do think that Ohio State has a lot more to play for in this football game than Penn State does. Penn State can lose this football game, win out easily with their remaining schedule, and still make the Big Ten championship game and potentially make the college football playoff. Ohio State, on the other hand, they already have a loss to Oregon. They've got Michigan later on, and they've also got a tough matchup with Indiana. that they have to circle, moving forward. But make no doubt about it, Ohio State is going to come in prepared for this football game. I think that they have more playmakers on both sides of the football, and I think that those playmakers will show up in some fashion. This game is going to come down to one big play, whether that's a mistake made by a team or a team or one of the team's offenses just getting a huge play in some capacity. I do think this is going to be a 4-quarter game. I also feel like Penn State can cover in this game, but I think that Ohio State will come in ready and they will get the win here. I'm predicting like a 2-point win. I think it's going to be 21-19, something like that. It's going to be kind of a weird little line there when it's all said and done. But I like the under here, and I like Penn State to cover. Not betting on this because I think this game could get a little bit squirrely. I think that there will be some weird calls in this game, and it's going to be. I feel like it's going to be a historic sort of game here, but not very high scoring, just a really close battle. And it's going to come down to who can run the football, who limits explosives, who limits the the turnovers and things like that. So good old fashioned little slobber knocker of a game here in the Big Ten. It's a shame though that this game, you've got 7:30 listed there, but it's actually a noon game. Fox does have this game at noon, which is just embarrassing for the sport.
Yeah.
I mean, at what point does Fox say, hey, at least 1 week out of the year, we like to have 2 games or something like that, so these big premier matchups can be played in prime time. It's just a shame to me that this game's going to be played at noon, and it's a shame for the Penn State fans who are going to show up and show out regardless. But obviously, when this game's played at night, it just has a lot more magnitude. So hate that, but give me Ohio State to win this one.
Yeah, biggest game of the week, guys. Let us know in the comment section. Ohio State fans, Penn State fans, thank you so much for watching. Give us your prediction in the comment section, and we hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button, coming and hanging out with us here on the First and Long College Football Show. All right, thank you guys who are watching live. I appreciate it. If y'all haven't done it, do me a favor, hit that like button real quick. Looks like y'all did, but I just in case, I sure do appreciate you guys watching and coming and hanging out with us. If you want to join the show or something, or you can get in the live chat, whatever works. We'll put you on the show. Let us know your predictions for this weekend, and maybe some predictions for some other games. Like I said, we went through a lot of the secondary games on Sunday, and that's how we're going to start doing things from now on. If you're somebody who watches these live shows a lot, we're going to, on Sundays, do the secondary matchups, the games that don't exactly make the list for the big games, right? We were kind of doing there for a second, like the all around the country type scramble drill thing. And I guess that was kind of like a brain seed of what is now what we're doing on Sunday night. We're talking about those games on Sunday and making this day about the big games, and looks like that's working so far. Actually, I had a lot of engagement so far this week on those videos, and we certainly do appreciate it. All right, which one do you want to do next, Mason?
Oh, let's get a SMU and Pitt out of the way here.
Mason's about to be mean. You probably should be. Let's get into it. Pitt at SMU. This is all right. Let's start that over, Mason. Make a note. Edit that out. Pitt at SMU. It's an ACC matchup that's got a lot of meaning to it. If this was a game that you pointed to before the season started and you said, "Oh, a lot of the ACC and a couple of contenders will be played in this one," you'd have been laughed right off of whatever chat you were on, forum, YouTube channel, whatever. But that is the case going into this ACC matchup. SMU is hosting Pitt. SMU is currently a 7.5-point favorite in this one. Kickoff will be at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Over under set at a high 58.5. Mason, Pitt has, as much as I hate to admit it, been the benefactor of what has been a pretty easy schedule this season. And I think we need to kind of take a look at that before we jump into really anything else in this matchup. Because I've got all the stats, and we're going to look at all that stuff. And look, there's a lot of good things that have went on at Pitt, guys, and we're going to talk about that. There's some really good things offensively that have went on. Some good things defensively. But as you'll see on your screen, there in the center, first of all, is the ACC standings, and you can see where these two teams lie as far as the ACC standings go. SMU 4-0, Pitt 3-0 currently in the SEC, third and fourth respectively. But there's one thing about Pitt's schedule that they've played and what they've got coming up that looks a lot different than SMU and what they've done this season and what they have coming up. SMU's already went through the hard part of their schedule for the most part, Mason, and took the loss there at BYU in the third week of the season. We thought, oh man, SMU. We thought maybe this team could do something. It started in the Nevada game the first week. It was like, whoa, SMU barely beat Nevada. What is going on? We talked about this team in the preseason. We had them in our preseason top 25, Mason. And we looked like idiots for about 4 weeks, right? We were like, holy crap. I hope nobody noticed that we had them in our preseason top 25. Well, here I am bringing it up, and I'm proud because this team is totally different than what it was even in week 3 of the season. Kevin Jennings stepped in for this offense at quarterback over Preston Stone, and that's made all the difference in the world. It's provided a lot of flexibility for this SMU offense, and they've put it to good use. They've certainly put it to good use. And the BYU loss, like I mentioned, we thought that was bad. Well, guess what? BYU's leading the Big 12 or tied with Iowa State in the Big 12 as far as, top team there, undefeated in the season so far. So looking at the schedule, the most impressive win here for SMU so far this season was at Louisville, 34-27, and it was a very impressive victory there. And then you look at Pitt. Kent State is who you start off with, and the fact that Pitt gave up 24 points to Kent State is actually pretty alarming, to be honest with you. Kent State is one of the worst football teams in all of America, and it has a lot to do. A lot of people have talked this season. I'm not going to get on a long rant on this, but a lot of people have talked about how the transfer portal has helped these smaller teams and helped this smaller team be able to be not so far behind as far as depth and blah, blah, blah. Well, the transfer portal has killed Kent State. So I think there's teams on either side of the argument as far as that goes. And Kent State has negatively been affected by the transfer portal and the coaches leaving that program and taking players with them and things of that sort. But 38-34 versus West Virginia, that win looks less and less impressive as the season goes on. 34-24 over North Carolina. I mean, North Carolina, whereas they might be a little bit better at this point than they were earlier in the season, they've been for the most part terrible. Lost their starting quarterback the very first week, and they've been able to score a little bit more points here lately. But you get my point. Only scored 17 against Cal. It's not been an impressive slate for Pitt. And if you look at the schedule they've got left, SMU got to go on the road to SMU, Virginia at home, Clemson at home, at Louisville, at Boston College. This is it. This is put up or shut up, gut check the rest of the way for this Pitt crew. It's been a really awesome story to start the season, but I think there's some serious speed bumps in the road coming up. And I feel like we have to pretty much preface everything that we're going to say as far as statistically with that. But let's talk about this SMU offense for a second. And I was trying to just beat you to the punch, Mason, because I knew you were going to gut punch my Pitt Panthers. And I kid around. It's been kind of a running joke around here. I've bet on Pitt a few times this season, and they've won me some money. And so I've been really excited about what Pitt has been able to do. And I know Pitt fans, you've been excited about it as well. No matter what happens at this point, almost no matter what happens at this point, it's a good season for Pitt. Um, Offensively for SMU, let's transition over to SMU. Like I said, this group has been really good through the air for the most part, and they've been, whereas they haven't been really efficient rushing the football. They've been able to get some yards on the ground, and that, like I said, had a lot to do with Kevin Jennings coming in at quarterback. He's really fleet of foot. The guy is super mobile, can get you the first down whenever you need it. And I think that helps this offense a ton, being able to convert on third downs, keep ahead of the sticks. And this team has done a pretty good job of that. The inspiration of this team is very clear. This is a team that wants to be known as a big team in the ACC, a powerhouse in college football. And I don't know that they're a powerhouse at this point, but nobody wants it worse than SMU. We've talked about it on this channel. This SMU club has deferred a bunch, millions and millions and millions of dollars to be able to join the ACC this season, and in return, they're having a really good season. And Rhett Lashley, where it started a little rocky, things have looked a lot better here of late. What do you think about this offense going against this Pitt defense? What are your thoughts, kind of overall, Mason? We'll just kind of free for all it here, but let's start with that SMU offense, and then you just kind of go wherever you want to go with it. But what are your thoughts this season with that group? It was a rough week last week, 6 turnovers in that game last week. Do you think the SMU offense is going to be able to bounce back? You hate not to have momentum going into this one, but they were still able to win the football game. And if you're going to learn lessons, you'd like to learn them while winning the football game if possible. What are your thoughts on this team and the offense so far this season?
Well, I think you got to put a lot of trust in Jennings at this point. Hasn't played phenomenal. Hasn't been just some stellar quarterback. He's not on any Heisman list or anything like that. But he's been very serviceable, considering he was the backup going into the season. Really, I've been really impressed with him and what he's been able to do with his legs in particular. But he just adds a different dynamic to this offense. And he's a big reason why they've been so successful in the running game. You see they're 24th in the country in rushing yards per game, averaging over 200 yards per game. That plays right into Pitt's hand on defense, where you see that they're top 10 in the country in rushing yards per game allowed. I also don't think that Pitt has really faced a running quarterback to the caliber of Jennings. So that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. Does Jennings hurt Pitt with his legs? I think he's good at passing the football, but there's no R.J. Maryland to throw to anymore. Lashley announced today that Maryland is out for the season with a knee injury. And he was a huge piece of this offense, in particular in the passing game. That's a guy who is listed as a tight end, but has been playing more and more like a wide receiver, and has really been the safety valve for this offense. So not having him is huge. But we've already seen this SMU offense pivot once at quarterback and put in the backup in Jennings and have more success. I doubt that you're going to find someone just as physically imposing as Maryland is or was for this SMU offense. But I think knowing going into this football game that you're going to be without him for the rest of the season helps them ramp up and get prepared for this Pitt defense that has really shown an ability to turn the ball over or get takeaways, I should say, on the defensive side of the football, and in particular last week against Syracuse, where they had 5 interceptions in that football game. I thought that was really phenomenal, a phenomenal outing by the Pitt defense. So to me, for SMU in this offense, you gotta make sure you limit those turnovers. You might give up 1 or 2, and on the flip side, I mean the SMU offense gave up 6 last week, so you're really looking at two tails or two different sides of the spectrum here in what these offenses did or what these teams did last week in the turnover game. But I think that Lashley will get that rectified and get that figured out. And I honestly think that SMU is going to have some success in the run game against Pitt this week. Like I said, they haven't faced a rushing team quite like SMU's. I know that Hampton is really good for North Carolina, but overall, North Carolina's offense was or is really relying on Hampton. I think that SMU has a little bit more balance to them offensively, and they should be able to run the football, which is going to open up some things in the pass game for them. I give the advantage here to SMU's offense over Pitt's defense, as good as Pitt's defense has played, so far this season.
Let's talk a little bit about that Pitt offense going against this SMU defense. This will be the matchup I think that kind of determines this football game. And Eli Holstein has had a really, really good season. I mean, there's really no getting around that. 64.2% completion, 1,805 yards, 17 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Has been sacked 14 times this season, Mason. And if you look at SMU, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's like a strength of this team to get after the quarterback, but I would, better than average, a little bit better than average with 17 sacks so far this year. It'll be interesting to see how this SMU defense matches up with this Pitt offense, right? Mumfield, the leading receiver, 27 receptions, 473 yards, 3 touchdowns. But Pitt has done a pretty good job at spreading the football around. You've got 3 different guys with 24 or more receptions, right? So, done a pretty decent job as far as moving the football around, getting into different guys' hands. And that's been the weakness for this SMU defense, Mason. Not been great at pass defense this season. You can see it on your screen. It's certainly the outlier. 100th in the country at pass yards per game allowed, 238.6. And that's where I believe that this line comes from as far as the over-under goes, being set relatively high on this football game. That's one of the biggest questions in this game. How beyond the Pitt defense being able to kind of disrupt the passing game of SMU, vice versa. What is SMU going to be able to do to be able to disrupt what Pitt has had going on? Pitt has been the benefactor last week anyway of some really short fields, but even whenever they got a short field, they hit an explosive play almost immediately. And that really it hasn't been a strength of this team rushing the ball. They haven't been explosive rushing the ball really at all, but they have been through the air. 35th in the country of pass plays of 20 plus yards, of 29 this season for the Pitt offense. That's really, really solid and matches up well against what I said, a soft secondary. And that's really the only way I can put it for SMU. SMU's got to figure out a way to disrupt this Pitt offense. Rush yards per game, Pitt hasn't been setting the world on fire there, but they've been extremely efficient running the football at 5.49 yards per carry this season. And like I said, we have to wait, who this team has played. And I don't know the exact metric on strength of schedule, but it's not been an extremely strong, schedule for Pitt. So you got to take some of these numbers with a grain of salt. Don't get me wrong, but SMU, no doubt about it, has to be able to stop the run on first down with this Pitt offense. And then they got to look for those explosive plays. And I think that'll be the recipe here. You got to get Pitt behind the sticks. Easier said than done. I think this SMU defense hasn't been the most impressive to me this season, Mason.
Yeah, really good against the run, but that kind of plays into Pitt's hand there a little bit, where they've been much better in the passing game. I really like Eli Holstein. I think he's played extremely well. His status is I guess a little bit up in the air for this game. Pat Narduzzi said after the game last week that he would be fine moving forward. He was jumping around with the team after the win, and it seemed like he was healthy. And then and maybe this is just gamesmanship by Narduzzi, but now he's saying that he's day to day he'll be a game time decision. I'd be pretty surprised if we don't see Holstein in this game, but Really like what I've seen out of him. I mean, he's made some extremely good throws, and been able to move the sticks whenever they need him to. It looks really easy for him against the ACC so far this year. So to me, I give the advantage to Pitt's offense versus this SMU defense, in particular in the passing game. I do think that if they find some success in the passing game, they could make this a long day for the SMU defense. But that SMU defense up front has been really good against some pretty decent running games or running teams, I should say. So to me, if you're making Pitt one dimensional, if they're not able to run the football, I think that bodes well for the SMU defense. Obviously, we'll have to see how that plays out because, like you said, I mean, Pitt, when they do need to run the football, they have been pretty efficient. But it's you're playing into the strength, I guess, of SMU's defense. So not sure that that's necessarily going to be the game plan. Maybe Pitt sort of passes to set up the run in this football game a little bit more. But definitely giving the edge here to Pitt's offense, in particular that passing attack with Eli Holstein.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, let's make our predictions on this football game, and then I just want to kind of talk about SMU here for a second, and what we think their chances are here as the ACC schedules kind of start to wind down to an end. I mean, here we are knocking on the door of November, so it's time to look at schedules and figure out who's going to be able to push their way through this thing. So, with that being said, what what's your prediction here, Mason? I got to be honest with you. I think SMU is going to be able to run away with this one. I think that they can win this game by 10 or 13 points. I think is a possibility. Now, I don't think Pitt is undefeated, and they're undefeated for a reason. Pitt is not a bad football team in any sense. But like we said, they're not battle tested, man, and they're going to walk into a situation where SMU wants it, and they want it really, really bad. So we'll see. Is Pitt content resting on their laurels? I mean, what's a one loss if you're already undefeated in your Pitt, right? But I just I think things point to a high scoring football game in this one. Just like the over under is set. I'm not so sure it's going to get all the way up to 58 and a half. I'm thinking more around the 55 region. So under might be something that I'm going to consider come our Thursday betting show. And if you're a college football betting fan, we hope that you'll come join us on Thursday evenings. Actually, this week it'll be on Wednesday evening due to Halloween. So tomorrow evening we'll be talking lines and things like that. So come and join us. But that'd be a play that I would consider. And SMU minus 7.5 is a play that I would consider. But I certainly think that SMU has got the edge, at least enough to win this football game. Certainly. So give me SMU to win this thing, and I think they keep marching towards the ultimate goal of making it to Charlotte for the ACC championship game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like that this game is played at home for SMU. I think that does add to their ability to cover here in this football game. Look, this is the first top 25 matchup that Pitt has had all season, and they've had some really close games. Now, Pitt in week 10 is a different football team than Pitt in week 6. I will, give you that. I think that they're playing sort of their best football right now, coming off of a big win against Syracuse. A lot of turnovers in that game. A lot of things went their way. I think that SMU is going to be able to protect the football much better than they did against Duke. And I think that they win this football game by about 10 or 13 points. As far as the over-under goes, I could see this being a little bit of a shootout. I'm probably going to stay away from that line, but I like SMU at minus 7.5. I'm not scared of that hook there on the end. I think that SMU is going to be able to win this one by double digits.
And just real quick before we close this video out, because we gotta. I mean, SMU is in contention here, so and Pitt is too, folks. So I mean, this we already kind of talked about Pitt and what they've got left. I mean, pretty tough schedule that Pitt's got left there. You can see it at the left of your screen. I already mentioned some of those football games, and I just don't think there's a chance in hell that Pitt's able to run that gauntlet. And that gauntlet starts this week at SMU, which I just predicted them to lose that game. So with them losing that football game, they've got to go. They got to host Virginia, host Clemson, right, and no bye weeks there. At Louisville, and then at Boston College, and no bye weeks between now and the rest of the season, right? So 11, 2, 9, 16, 23, 30th, those are all dates in November. No bye weeks. So really, really tough situation there for Pitt. SMU, on the other hand, if they win this football game, Boston College is a formidable opponent. So I'm not going to say that that's just like guaranteed or anything, but SMU is definitely going to be favored in that game. Going to have to, you'll be hosted in Boston College, so that certainly helps. At Virginia, I don't, it might be a little bit of a high scoring football game there, but I like SMU. And then Cal, it'll be interesting to see how Cal's defense matches up with SMU's offense, but I just don't think Cal has got the firepower to be able to hang with SMU. So things look really good for SMU if they can win this thing out, man. And meanwhile, you've got Clemson, who's got some, they've got a big matchup this week, right? And got a chance that there's a chance they could lose this week to Louisville. And then Miami has flirted with disaster all year. So I think that Miami's going to Charlotte, but I'm not ready to say that I'm just giving this thing to Clemson. SMU's got a shot to make it to Charlotte here, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at their remaining schedule, they've really got a chance to go undefeated in the ACC, which nobody really expected in year one for the Mustangs here. Only loss being to BYU. That looks like a really quality loss at this point, but BYU being a Big 12 team doesn't affect their chances in the ACC championship. Anxious to see how it all plays out. Really, I guess my biggest concern would be Miami, but when you look at Miami's schedule, they've got a real opportunity, probably a better opportunity than SMU does to win out the remainder of their regular season games. So you could be looking at the end of the year with 3 undefeated ACC teams in conference play. How does that play out? Who's going to be, what's the tiebreaker? All 3 of those teams will obviously not have played head to head. So how does that all shake out? I would assume that it would be Clemson versus Miami if that were the case, but I'm not even sure what the tiebreaker is for the ACC right now. But I like SMU's chances to win out. For Pitt, on the other hand, I think Pitt is looking at 1 or 2 wins in the last 5 weeks of their schedule here, and could potentially go 1-4 down the stretch here. I think it really just does get that hard for them. Louisville's not an easy team by any stretch. I would favor Louisville in that matchup, and then I think you win one of the 2 between Virginia and Boston College, and end up with 4 losses to end the season for Pitt.
Yeah, I think you got to concentrate on that Virginia and at Boston College game. I mean, obviously, as a team, you concentrate on all of them, but if you can somehow win those 2 football games, that's a 9-3 season, and that is just outstanding for Narduzzi and Pitt, no doubt about it. And it's been a great run for this team so far this season, winning a lot of close games, and sometimes that is a good sign of good coaching, Mason. And it's been a great run for Pitt, and they're going to have an opportunity to prove it to the world this weekend in Dallas as they will face off against SMU. All right, that is crazy, man. I mean, that's wild that it's coming down to that. Oh, I don't know what the ACC tiebreaker is. That is interesting, because it sure does look like we're gonna talk about Clemson here in just a second, but I need to pull up their remainder of their schedule before we get on that video, because that's really, really interesting. All right, we just got a couple of them left. Thank y'all so much for watching. I certainly do appreciate it. If you hadn't done it already, hit that like button for us real quick. We are going to run through these last ones pretty quick. These are definitely ones that I feel like will be a little bit quicker here. but I did want to pull up the Clemson Tigers schedule so that
Yeah,
I've
they
got
got
that handy.
Virginia Tech, Pitt, Citadel, and South Carolina after Louisville.
My goodness gracious. This thing is, you're right, this is going to end up being a doggone three-way tie here. That's insane. All right, cool. That sounds like good TV to me. Y'all let me know in the comment section, what's the ACC tiebreaker? And I'm going to tell them in this video to tell us the same thing. Is this banner updated right here? Mason, Louisville at Clemson minus 10.5. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. I got to start with that. I didn't do a header. Louisville at Clemson. It's an ACC showdown. Clemson, of course, undefeated, minus that week 1 loss at a neutral site against the Georgia Bulldogs. Ever since, Clemson has been able to take care of business against App State, NC State, Stanford, FSU, Wake, Virginia, and now matching up with Louisville. They're in Death Valley. Clemson is a 10.5-point favorite. The over-under set at a really high 63 points. Whoa, that's a lot of points. This is a big game for Clemson, Mason, because as we look at the rest of their schedule, this very well may be the last speed bump in the road for Clemson, as there looks like they're marching towards an ACC championship bid. But hold the phone. There's multiple teams in the ACC right now undefeated. We were just talking about it on another video that we were doing here on the First and Long College Football Show. SMU, SMU, Clemson, Miami, they're all undefeated in the ACC at this point. There's no margin for error for any of these three teams. And with that being said, this is a really, really, really big matchup. Let's kind of look at Louisville, who's coming into town to play there in Death Valley. There's been some ups and there's been some downs for this Louisville team this season, Mason. And it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, Louisville fans, but seems to be in the first quarter are most of the downs for this team, right? If you took away some of the first quarter woes from this team over this season, and specifically like the Notre Dame game where you turned the ball over 3 times in the first quarter, this team is probably a lot better off record-wise. But that's not the case, and that's not how football works. So with that being said, this team's been a little bit inconsistent. Like I said, there's been some high moments. Louisville very well had the opportunity to beat Miami earlier this season, right? Hung right there in that football game. About 100 points scored in that football game, right? So we've seen the offense be versatile, and we've seen them be able to score a lot of points whenever they need to hang in a football game. The defense, I think, has been a little bit of a disappointment at times for Louisville this season. What do you think about the Cards heading into this matchup? We're going to talk about the Clemson defense here in a minute, but we are talking matchups here. Clemson's gave up some points this year, Mason, and you saw the total in this football game at 63. Vegas has got this thing as a shootout, man, and a really entertaining football game. So, what does Louisville need to do in this football game to secure a victory? This is a lot better Clemson offense than what we've seen over the last few seasons as well. So you kind of a trade-off there. What does the Cards need to do? What does Tyler Shook need to do to be able to get the dub here?
Well, I think they're going to have to continue to pass the football like they've done all year. They've been pretty good at passing, 10th in the country in passing yards per game. I'm concerned about their ability to run the football in this game. They haven't done a good job of it all year long. They're 68th in the country in rushing yards. Their attempts are 112th in the country, just 30.5 attempts per game. And in this football game, you're going up against Clemson, which I get hasn't been the most elite defense that we've seen in years past from Clemson. this season it seems like they're giving up more through the air, so it kind of plays to the favor. It really plays to the over, which is why the line is set so high. Louisville does a great job at passing the football. Like I said, can they continue that against this Clemson pass rush? I mean, is Clemson going to be able to get home in this one? I think that is a big question for me, and really, I'm curious to see what Louisville does starting out in this football game. Clemson is third in the country in on defense in giving up points in the first quarter. They're averaging just 1.4 points in that first quarter, and then it kind of gets worse as the game goes on. By the fourth quarter, they're 124th in the country, giving up almost 10 points in that last quarter there. So how does Louisville start? Right? How do they start in this first quarter? I think that could dictate how the game goes. And then, too, I mean, obviously protecting the football. Clemson's done a good job with takeaways. They're 20th in the country in interceptions, 14th in the country in fumbles, and 36th in the country in sacks. So how does Clemson's pass rush affect this offensive line for Louisville? They're kind of middle of the pack there in giving up sacks at 55th in the country. To me, though, it's going to come down to the passing attack. I mean, like I said, Tyler Shook has played really well, and I think that this Louisville team as a whole is being discounted because of the loss to Notre Dame, because of the loss to Miami, the loss to SMU. All games were decided by one score, right? All games were games that they were in until the fourth quarter, and they were back and forth games and really fun ones to watch as well. Can they win a one score game for once? I mean, that's kind of my question here. I think that people are kind of sleeping on this Louisville team. Like I said, because of the 3 losses, they just see the 3 losses in the win column and think that this is a team that's not going to be able to get it done. But from a personnel standpoint, I do still believe that this is a pretty good team, and they've shown in those games that even when they're down by 14 points or something like that, they can come back. Tyler Shook is a baller, and he can bring you back from a large deficit. What do we see in this football game from him, and can he show that baller's mentality to go out there and bring the team back if they fall behind? Again, first quarter is huge here. I think that if Louisville wins this game, they need to win it in the first quarter against a tough defense for Clemson, at least in the first quarter. Can they go out and get up by 3 or 7 points in that first quarter? That's kind of the question to me.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I think we need to mention, too, Colin Lacey is not playing for Louisville anymore, at least for right now. He decided he was going to quit this season. You make of that whatever you will. Everybody's got an opinion on that. But fact of the matter is, he's decided to hang it up for the season, and his agent has told Louisville that there's a possibility he could come back to Louisville next season. Who knows? Ja'Cory Brooks obviously is the number one guy from this point forward on as far as wide receivers go on this offense, and he certainly is a deep down the field threat. This team's been extremely explosive, 7th in the country of pass plays of 20+ yards. That's what's grown this season. Is the offense has grown from early in the season to now. I think they know their identity a little bit more than they did to start the season. You got some really good running backs in this room. I feel like the running back room is underrated at Louisville a little bit, and it's a lot of young guys, so they've made some crucial mistakes, man. But I think Louisville is set in the running back room. Just kind of a side note, set in that running back room for years to come. You got several young guys that have done really well. And they've been efficient running the football, 27th in the country, 5.16 yards per carry. So whereas they haven't ran it up with the yards, they have been efficient. Let's talk defensively. This defensively was supposed to be what was a little more known about this football team coming in from the preseason. You had a much higher percentage of returning production defensively from last season, but I think if you're looking at it objectively, I don't know that it was a great defense last year. It wasn't great. It had some good moments, no doubt, but um, it's left a little bit to be desired for me defensively. Now, I like what you said a minute ago about who this team has lost to. Think about who this team has lost to this season and what all those teams have in common. They're all college football playoff contenders, every single one of them. So this isn't a Louisville team that has lost and got the score ran up on them by, you know, Helen Keller School for the Blind and Deaf or something. I mean, when they've lost games, it's been to formidable opponents. Whether and that's really not even arguable at this point. But the numbers are what they are defensively. Not great, just not really great. Haven't caused a lot of turnovers. Haven't been able to get a ton of sacks. I would say been okay at getting after the quarterback as far as sacks. Been decent as getting behind the line of scrimmage, tackles for loss. I got 51 of them this season. That's 33rd in the country. So been a little bit disruptive in the backfield, and I just thought that maybe this team would be a little bit better against the rush. And if you want to look at a strength of the defense, I guess it is technically against the rush, but against the pass is where they've really struggled. It's pass yards per game allowed 222.8, and some of that's skewed by some of the teams that they've played. Don't get me wrong, but you can see it there in yards per attempt allowed. That number doesn't lie. 7.4. That's 82nd in the country. That's not good. Not bad on third down. You can kind of attribute that to being able to somewhat stop the run on first and second down. They're going to have to be able to shut something down in this game, Mason. They've got to figure out a way to limit that rushing attack by Clemson, and it's a lot easier said than done. But I think this team has got to focus on the run and try to just keep things in front of them defensively on the back end. Something they haven't been particularly good at, although okay against, they haven't given up like big plays, but offenses have moved the ball through the air. What do you think about Louisville defensively going into this matchup? And we'll kind of transition over into Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. This is a underperforming defense for Louisville. Going into this season, we thought that they would be much better. They just gave up 27 points after or against Boston College this past week. Boston College has been a pretty good offense. I'll give you that, but also 20 points they gave up against Virginia. Of course, the 52 that they gave up against Miami. Miami's a tough team to stop defensively, regardless of who you are. I think that's a team that's going to get that they're going to get their points. But really, defensively, this team's got to play better. Similar to the offensive side of the football, this team's got to play better in the first half defensively. In the first quarter, they're giving up 8.2 points. Defensively, and then in the second they're giving up 7.6. That's 122nd and 68th in the country. Now in the third and fourth quarter they do get a little bit better. They're 33rd and 31st in the country, averaging just 8.7 points total in the second half. But again, I'm going to point to the strong start here for Louisville is so important on both sides of the football. They've got to limit the scoring in the first half here because Clemson, I mentioned the defense and how good they've been in the first half. They're equally, if not better, on offense in the first half. They're first in the country in the first quarter scoring, fifth in the country in the second quarter scoring. They're averaging 26.6 points in the first half. So how does this defense come out? They've shown an ability to make adjustments, it seems like, throughout the game, but are they going to be prepared going into this one to limit the explosive plays in that first half, give their offense a chance to go out and take a lead there in the second half?
Absolutely. Let's jump over into Clemson, and we'll start on the offensive side of the ball because that's what came up first here, but this is a much improved unit, in my opinion. There was a lot of flack sent the offensive coordinator's way what's his name, the Riley,
Garrett
Riley. Um, he caught a lot of flack last year, man, and some of it probably deserved, but I don't think he was dealt the best hand necessarily. Well, now he's starting to make wine out of water. This offense has looked a ton better, and a lot of it has to do with Cade Klubnik. Cade Klubnik has looked hands down so much better this season than what he looked like last season, and has been a perfect example of a quarterback that can grow. Sometimes you see quarterbacks come in and they do one thing their freshman year, and it's like, hey, that was a pretty good freshman year. And then the next year they do the exact same thing. And then junior year they do the exact same thing, maybe a little better, maybe a little worse. Cade Klubnik showed improvement. 66.7%, 1,836 yards, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So those are good numbers, no doubt. And you can look at the numbers for this offense, and not a ton to pick on, really. That look outside of the Georgia game, this offense has done their dang thing. And to be honest with you, a lot of the stats from the Georgia game are holding these stats back. A lot of these stats would be even better, right? And a lot of the national rankings would be a whole lot better. So just like in college football playoff rankings or ratings or whatever you want to call it, we're not going to sit there and hold that against them. Georgia's one of the best defenses in the country. There's no arguing that now. So I'm really impressed with this group. People stepping up at the wide receiver position has been a big difference for this team. Now, is it where it needs to be? Is the wide receiver group where it needs to be? For Clemson to win national championships, or what we've seen them do in the mid 20 teens. I don't know if we're there yet, but this is a good step in the right direction. The offense has been explosive through the passing game this season. That has not been the case. Passing yards per game, 290.6. That has not nearly been the case. So you got to tip your cap when things are improving and looking good. And I have to tip my cap to Clemson on this one. The offense has looked a whole lot better this season. And beyond that, they've protected the quarterback. I really noticed this going through the numbers, and I got to give my kudos. Matt Luke is a great offensive line coach, man. And he just proves that year in, year out. Everywhere he goes, he's back out of retirement or his hiatus or whatever. And look at the numbers. 20th in the country at tackles for loss allowed, only 30 this season, and 7th in the country with only 6 sacks allowed. A really good offensive line coach can make the world of difference, and it's really been the case at Clemson with Matt Luke showing up and helping out with that group. What do you think about the offense this season, Mason?
Yeah, well, I mentioned how good they've been in the first half. I think this offense's identity has really changed here as of late. I mean, we thought that this would be a run-first offense with Phil Baffa, toting the rock, and they've been good in the run game. I'm not saying they've been bad. They're 25th in the country, averaging just under 200 yards per game, but they're not. They're 89th in the country in rush attempts per game at 34.1. So this is a team that has really passed the ball more than they've run it, just a touch more than they've run it, averaging 35.4 pass attempts in the country. That's 26th in the country, or pass attempts per game, which is 26th in the country. So really different looking offense than what we've seen from Clemson, or what we saw from them last year under Garrett Riley, which I've noted in the past. But Garrett Riley, comes in from TCU, a team that was playing in the national championship game. So he really missed a lot of the postseason practices and getting with the team during like the bowl week and things like that. And then Clemson had a lot of wide receivers out last year as well through spring practice. So it just seemed like the offense wasn't really on the same page. Now it's looking like they are very much so on the same page, and have the receivers now to really push the ball down the field. Really like what Wesco has brought to this team as a true freshman, and Klubnik is just playing much better. This is an offense that does not turn the ball over. They don't give up sacks and they don't turn the ball over. That makes for a very deadly offense. And on top of that, they're passing the ball very well. This is a complete turnaround for this offense, and Clemson fans got to be really happy with what they've seen and the progression that they've seen year over year for this team, and also game over game. It feels like they're still playing their best football, and it doesn't seem like they peaked too early or anything like that. They've sustained since that Georgia game. They've sustained really excellent offensive performances throughout the year.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the turnovers last year because I think you're exactly right. That was a huge problem last year, and there's really no telling what this offense would have done last year. There's literally no telling what this offense would have done last year if they didn't turn the ball over so much. I mean, that was just a huge issue, and the defense bailed them out over and over. The defense got tons of turnovers last year, and lo and behold, they're good at doing it again. Right, 36 in the country with 13 total turnovers this season. This defense, look, the starting defense has been good for Clemson. The starting group has been good. You see Wade whoop ass wood as there at the right side of your screen. Um, Look, I mean, you hear coaches talk about guys in the preseason, and Woodaz is a guy who's been around a little bit, but he's never had a year like he's having right now. There's no doubt about that. And coach was talking about him in the preseason and said, this is a guy to really look out for. And that's the time of year you can listen to coaches and who they're talking about, and usually correlates to some success in the season. And that's been the case for Wade Woodaz. Been really, really good at the linebacker position this season, but it's the second, not the secondary, but the second string, I guess you could say, the second group on that depth chart that's been concerning to me, Mason. And obviously these numbers somewhat reflect those guys just as much as they reflect, the first string guys. All the numbers are mixed up here, but I've really noticed this season, anytime that Clemson has gotten, a margin that they felt comfortable enough to throw in some depth pieces into the defense, they've given up some big plays and they've given up some big points. And it didn't necessarily have to be to good offenses to do that. And you can even point to the second half of the Georgia game where Clemson goes into halftime. Georgia's had Georgia even scored in the first half, 3 points or what was it? It was something. It was
Yeah, I
hadn't
think it's
given
like
up a
six
ton.
to three.
Yeah. So, and then all of a sudden, Georgia comes out in the second half and scores over 30 points in the second half, right? So I think that's kind of the biggest concern for this group right now is depth, I guess, and getting some of those young guys acclimated. And it's easier said than done. Getting those guys playing time and getting them in there. It's easier said than done. Some of these guys, they're not all created equal coming out of high school, right? Sammy Brown looked amazing in the spring game, and then you know eh, I haven't really seen him do a whole heck of a lot the rest of the season that was super impressive. So, um, you never know when some of these young guys are going to emerge. There's no better place than here, no better time than now for Clemson's defensive second string pieces to step up and provide some depth. You're going to need it. There's going to be a lot of running in this football game. You're going to need guys to be able to rotate in and out. And not to mention, we're in the 10th week of the season. So depth is key. And not to mention, we're going to talk about it here at the end of the video and what Clemson's got left on their schedule. But this is a team that is eyeing a trip to Charlotte in an ACC championship game. So that depth is going to be just uber important as we get closer and closer to the first weekend of December for a conference championship week. What do you think about the defense, Mason? What's your thoughts this season? They've been really good in some aspects, not so good in some others. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, when you look at the total, points given up or just the total stats for the defense in general, a lot of these numbers are skewed by blowout wins where the second string came in and gave up a ton of points in the fourth quarter in particular. And mainly I'm talking about Virginia where Clemson's up big. They've only given up 10 points to Virginia. And then in the third quarter or in the fourth quarter, they give up 21 points and it made it kind of look like a little bit closer of a ball game than it really was. But had a similar outing against NC State where they're up big and they give up, I think it was another 21 points in the fourth quarter. App State scored 20 on them, but that game was well put away when they started doing their scoring. So really outside of the Georgia game, I mean, they've had really good defensive showings up until the fourth quarter when the game was put away. I mean, they only gave up 14 points to Wake Forest. Those points were scored in the first half. So they held strong in the second half there, only gave up 13 to FSU, 14 to Stanford. So to me, I feel like the starting defense is much better than if you were to look at the overall stats for the defense for Clemson. Which I don't know that in this football game you're really going to be going to the second string. So I don't think that is much of a factor in this one. This is still a really good Clemson defense, and I have a feeling that they are going to show up and show out in this football game and kind of pin their ears back and go after these Cardinals here this week. Going up against that offensive line, I think is a real opportunity for this defense to step up and kind of plant the flag as the premier defense in the ACC, which has shown week in and week out that there's not a great defense in this conference. Maybe Clemson kind of plants the flag and says, hey, we still know how to play defense over here in Clemson, South Carolina.
Yeah, and you had mentioned it, and we kind of talked about it earlier. This team needs to continue with their getting turnovers, and they're going to have opportunities to do so in that secondary, and that's where the majority of their turnovers have came from through interceptions in that secondary. So they're going to get opportunities to do it this week because Louisville is going to be throwing the football. So there's going to be opportunities for that, and this defense capitalizing on those opportunities, or Louisville being able to protect the football, I think is going to have some kind of part in the outcome of this football game. What's your predictions here, man? Because it really feels like Louisville has got a chance to hold this one within 10.5. Now, home field advantage for Clemson here. You know what I'm saying? That's worth something, no doubt about it. But Louisville is a team that is battle tested, man. Like, they've been through the ringer already this season. They know what they're about, and I don't think that there's any quit in this Louisville team at this point. They're not so far out of everything to where, they're going to be out there quitting or anything. And almost kind of like wounded animal mode for Louisville in this situation. And I guess kind of in the same sense that it's the same way for Clemson, because if you lose this one, that's 2 losses this season, right? Now both of them to formidable opponents. And we wanted to kind of mention Clemson's schedule here and what they've got left. You got Louisville obviously this weekend. You're hosting Louisville, and then got to go to Virginia Tech next week, to Pitt, Citadel at home, and then South Carolina at home. Still got a couple of little speed bumps on that. And Virginia Tech is not a terrible team, right? So there's still some meat left on the schedule. South Carolina, a good defensive team. And you never know what can happen in a rivalry game, right? I guess. Although Clemson's pretty much dominated that series. It seems like Louisville can keep it within 10.5 on this one. As I said, I'm not ready to say that I think Louisville's going to win this football game. I think Clemson defensively is going to have to obviously get some stops, but I think steal the football away from Louisville once or twice in this game, because this is a formidable passing attack for Louisville. Just like Vegas, I expect there to be some scoring in this football game. Again, I'm not ready to sit there and say over 63 in this game. That's a high number. Join us for our betting show, which will be tomorrow. And I may have a play on this total, but I can almost guarantee it won't be over. Give me Louisville to cover the spread here, but I think Clemson wins this football game. Too much on the line for the Tigers. I think the offense is going to have a nice day for Clemson in this one. I feel like they've been working towards this game. all season. I've seen more excitement and better energy from Clemson this season. I think this is an opportunity to kind of show everybody that Clemson very well could possibly be a playoff team, and they certainly are a contender in the ACC at this point. What's your prediction?
Yeah, well, make no doubt about it. Clemson is not just trying to be a playoff team. They're trying to get back to national prominence and say, "Hey, we're a team that is a national championship contender." And I think that they further that narrative this week against Louisville. I feel like the perspective, the outlook for from the national media and from Vegas on Clemson is, and on their defense is kind of what I just mentioned. A lot of fourth quarter scores given up with the backups in and things like that. I don't see Clemson having any sort of let up in this football game. I don't think that this is one where they want to sort of play around or anything like that. I think Clemson is going to come out and score early. And I think that their defense is going to take every opportunity that Louisville thinks that they have in this football game and just put the fire out immediately. And it can be very demoralizing on a team. Louisville has benefited from sticking around in a lot of these games in weeks past against some bigger opponents, but outside of Notre Dame, I don't think that Louisville has faced a defense quite like Clemson's, and Clemson's got the offense to really kind of help their defense out and keep their defense off the field in a way that Notre Dame just kind of does not. So to me, I do have Clemson covering the spread here. I think that they can win by about 17 this week. I've got the total at about 34-17, so that the under would hit in this instance. But I wouldn't be surprised if it gets a little bit higher scoring. Wouldn't be surprised if Clemson's able to put up more than 40 in this football game. So I'd probably stay away from that total. But I think that Clemson really just kind of shows up and shows out, has a complete game this week at home, going up against Louisville, which is a serviceable team, no doubt. But Clemson probably has a chip on their shoulder, thinking, we haven't been to the playoffs in a while. We think we've got one of the best offensive coordinators in the game. Couple that with a Heisman contending quarterback. And an offense that is really running on all cylinders. Give me Clemson to win and cover in this game against Louisville and kind of put an end to Louisville's season at the end of the day.
Very good. Thank y'all so much for watching. I do appreciate it. We've got one more game we're going to break down here. We've got just that little old rivalry out there in Jacksonville. No big deal. The world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Again, thank y'all for tuning in. If you haven't done it, hit the like button for us real quick. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button, obviously hit that so that way you know when we've got stuff getting loaded up and headed your way and all that. We're heading into week 10 here, and we're giving our previews and predictions for all the biggest games. If you missed some of the ones we did on Sunday, please go back on our homepage and go check that out. All right, let's do this last one, man. And this one obviously hits a little close to home, right? It's the Georgia-Florida game, and it's the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. I'd be lying if I said I wish I wasn't there, Mason. I wish we were there again, my friend. If you're watching or listening to this and you're in Ponte Vedra, right, or you're at Jacksonville Beach, right, or anywhere in between, Gainesville to Athens, getting ready to go to this game, maybe enjoying the last little bit of beach activities for the week, have a drink for us, right? We don't get to be there this year. Mason and I went to this game year after year for a block of years there. And I guess that would have been in the 20 teens there, kind of pre-COVID. And it was kind of I guess, an every year type of activity for us. And I have some of my fondest college football memories around the stadium that's pictured on the screen there. And as soon we've joked around, but as soon as Mason's kid is old enough to watch my youngest kid, we're out of here. We're headed back to Jacksonville for the weekend. we've got a favorite house we like to rent down there. We got all that stuff, man. We'll be back. But if you're down there this week and you're listening to this right now, getting ready for the game, crack one for us. Have fun. Be nice out there. No need in bullying any Gators or Gators getting nasty with any dogs. We know how it goes whenever one team beats the other. Getting out of that stadium is something else, right, Mason? This is a really this is a different version of this game than what we saw in the early 2000s, and Georgia's owned this series for the most part. And there's been one game that you can really point to over the last several years there where Dan Mullen was still at Florida and was able to beat Georgia, and that was a really good Florida team that season that ended up going on and almost beating Alabama in the SEC championship. Really, really good team. I believe that was 2020, Mason. A really solid team there. That's not. I don't think that's really the case this year. Now, I must say, the Florida Gators are trending in the correct direction so far this season. I feel like things are starting to. Maybe some people are starting to be able to see what Billy Napier is kind of working on, but the nickname has rang true. Sunbelt Billy, right? It's been a nickname that's traveled across the country, and Billy Napier's got a chance to put up and shut everyone up in this football game. Georgia is a 16-point favorite headed into this one. Over under is set at 52. Let's kind of jump into the matchup here. The Georgia offense this year, Mason, has been inconsistent. There's been a lot of inconsistencies, and this is something that you and I have talked ad nauseum about. And at times this Georgia offense has been downright mediocre, right? And I think a lot can be made of the fact that I think Georgia is kind of on plan C, and I think they're a little bit behind schedule on offense right this second. And what I mean by that is, if you've paid attention to Georgia football over the last few months, that there's been a lot of wide receivers leave this program for a multitude of different reasons. Whether it was Ladd McConkey to the NFL, whether it was some of them by way of Athens Clark County Police Department, any way you can just about imagine Georgia's lost a wide receiver that way this year. And to start the season, that was one of the deepest position groups of the offense, right? And Georgia just should be thanking their stars that was the case. I don't think that Carson Beck and these wide receivers have been on the same page. And I think it's been a work in progress for the most part throughout the season. And it's looked really ugly at times. Georgia doesn't have the ability and the luxury of leaning on a run game for an entire football game. That's not this Georgia offense at this point. Now, we saw Georgia's offensive line, I think, personally, play the best game that they've played all year against Texas the last time we saw Georgia on the field. I thought that was the best we've seen the offensive line play in that football game. And then it seems as though Georgia could be getting a little bit healthier, maybe getting Tate Ratledge back this week, which would, for a lot of people's money, is the best offensive guard in the country and one of the most highest rated offensive guards as far as NFL draft boards and things of that nature. So there's a lot of things that you can point to this season and not like about this Georgia offense. But I am in the minority of the fact that I think this Georgia offense is figuring things out. Now, I don't think there's any snap your fingers and it's going to happen in 1 week type of thing. But this team has been really explosive through the air, even with some of the issues that they've had at wide receiver. You've got wide receivers having to step up at this point that early in the season didn't think that they would have to. And in this pro style offense, we've talked about it a ton. These route trees for these wide receivers are very complex. And depending on what the defense does, it depends on what you need to do. And being on the same page as a wide receiver and a quarterback in a pro style system is much easier said than done. And timing is super, super important in any offense. So this Georgia offense has been out of whack at times. And even through those trials and tribulations, we've seen this team be able to be very explosive through the passing attack. And most of those, for whatever reason, in second halves of football games, not in the first half. So I think a key to victory here in this game is pretty simple. Can you run the football? And if you need to, at least a little bit, but if you can run it, you'd like to be able to lean on that a little bit more and maybe test out that offensive line that you feel like is probably playing a little bit better and a little more healthy. Um, but Carson Beck he's got to get on the same page with these wide receivers, Mason. I mean, that's if Georgia wants to achieve their ultimate goals this season of winning the SEC or going to the playoff and winning a national championship, Carson Beck is going to have to get on the same page with these guys at some point. Otherwise, it's not going to be happening for the Georgia Bulldogs this season. What is your thoughts on the offense? I know you and I share a lot of the same thoughts on this, so I'm sorry if I stole something that you were going to talk about. But me and you talk about this Georgia offense more than any offense in the country, obviously, because we're Georgia fans. What's your thoughts, man?
Well, it's a different Georgia offense than we're used to seeing under Kirby Smart. It's a pass first offense. They're 15th in the country in passing yards per game, just under 300, and 123rd in the country in rush attempts per game at 29 attempts per game. That is not the RBU that we're used to seeing from Georgia. And I think that there's a recruiting advantage that Kirby is trying to exploit. This is a team that has not recruited the receiving position very well in the past few years, really since George Pickens came through the program. So I think that the part of the reason for a pass heavy offense is to try to catch the eyes of some of those 5-star wide receivers that Georgia just hasn't had any luck getting in quite some time. But nonetheless, when you look at their ability or inability to run the football, I think that you can also look at that and say that that's a reason for Georgia passing the football much more as an offense. They've been banged up, in the running back room. They lost both the Robinsons, Branson and Roderick. Roderick before the season started. I'm not even sure if Georgia's gonna see him come back, if we're gonna get to see him at all. But it sounds like Branson could be back at some point this year. We'll have to wait and see. But Trevor Etienne, the former Florida player, has been showing up and showing out these past few games. He's been dynamic in the running attack. He's been dynamic in the passing game as well. Going up against this Florida defense, do we see Georgia kind of change the game plan a little bit, play a little bit more of a balanced approach? Because Florida has not been good at stopping the run so far this year, and teams have really ran the ball a lot against Florida because of that. They're averaging on defense for Florida. They're 128th in the country in rushing attempts allowed at 42.6 attempts per game. So what do we see from Georgia in this offense this week? What's the game plan? That's a big question to me. I tend to think that they should try to continue to pass the football to get Carson on the same page with these receivers. They are certainly out of sync when you see Carson's cadence or the way he's processing the football and receiving the football from the snap and throwing to the receiver. He's off just a tick when it comes to the ball actually, arriving to the receiver, and that's caused some drops. That's caused some overthrows. That's caused some receivers running the wrong routes in certain cases. But that's not all on Carson either. It's the offense as a whole. Things aren't getting rep properly in practice, I would guess. And that's really put a hampering on this offense. How does that look in this football game? Do they continue to play their game plan or what they've game planned so far this year, or do they try to run the football more, establish that to get that aspect of the offense ramped up for the stretch here? I think that the Georgia offense is kind of at a crossroads in this game, and how they handle this game, I think, should offer some some sort of a vision for the future of this offense, but make no doubt about it, this offense is being looked at under a microscope by the coaches, by the fans, by the media. Everybody is looking to this offense that was supposed to be leading this team in a sense with all the returning talent and wondering where the production is going to come from. Got to get on the same page with these receivers now, and in this week and in weeks forward. Can they play a little bit better as a unit and continue to grow week over week? Because this is a Georgia team as a whole that has not played a complete football game yet, but in particular on the offensive side.
Yeah, it's certainly been a bit of a changing of the guard from what we're used to as far as Georgia offensively over the last few years. And I don't know that Georgia fans, including myself, know really how to gauge this thing, or at least did at the beginning of the season. And I think we're starting to be able to see a little bit more about what the identity is of this Georgia offense. And if they can just figure out a way to run the football a little bit better, I mean, look at the explosive run plays this season, 110th in the country. Now, I'm one of those people where if you look at a stat and you're somewhere right in the middle, I don't think that's a bad thing. All right, and being in the middle is good. Being at the towards one, obviously, the greater you are. 110th is absurd. 27 runs this season of 10 plus yards is absolutely absurd. And defenses are playing Georgia based on that. I mean, and so we got to see if Florida is going to back up off the football in this game. We got to see Georgia be able to run it, right? And you've got to be able to see a little bit more of that. That's something I'll be looking for in this week's game. Defensively, which defense shows up? I guess is my biggest question. We've seen some really good Georgia defense over the last, the last game, essentially. Getting after Quinn Ewers, getting after the Texas Longhorns like nobody's business, right? Michael Williams was a big part of that. This defense, we see what the top end of it is, or we consider that to be the best of what we've seen against Texas this season. And then we've seen games like Mississippi State where maybe some focus was lost, right? And some explosive plays were given up. Georgia overall has been good on defense. Don't get me wrong. And this is a defensive-led football team at this point. Can they continue to put good quarters together and not take quarters off? That's been the biggest complaint about this defense so far this year. They're going to be going against an inexperienced quarterback, right, in DJ Lagway. That hasn't been a great recipe for Florida in this rivalry. Anytime I feel like you can almost point to it every single year. Whoever's got the most experienced quarterback or the quarterback that keeps the level head wins this football game. And we've seen some of the worst losses for Florida over the last few years be with quarterbacks that probably had no business being in the football game. DJ Lagway is going to have a lot on his plate this weekend with this defense. And I'm interested to see, like I said, can Georgia carry it over from what we saw in the Texas game? What are your thoughts on the defense?
Well, they've played really well when Michael Williams is playing. I think having him in this game is a huge benefit. Obviously, he's going to be a first-round draft pick more than likely. We saw him go out against Alabama, and look, Georgia had already given up a ton of points by the time he went out, but he went out in that football game. Prior to that, though, Georgia had given up 3 points to Clemson, 3 points to Tennessee Tech, 12 points to Kentucky, and then we get him back in full full health, I guess you could say, against Texas, and they only give up 15 points. So a big part of the game plan defensively for Georgia does revolve around Michael Williams. It seems like he is healthy and a full go at this point. Warren Brinson is fully healthy, it seems like, and he's ready to go. Jordan Hall, we still haven't seen him yet this season. I'd like to think we would see him at the tackle position this week, but they haven't really needed him in the same breath. I'll say that. And then, Smile Munden is a guy who is coming back. I don't know if he'll play this game or not, but I would venture to guess that he doesn't because Georgia is very set at the linebacker position. But he's a big part of that. He's probably the best linebacker Georgia has, in particular in pass coverage. So not having him in the middle of that defense, the most experienced linebacker as well, does not help. Does not help the team. But up front, I feel like Georgia is set. Now on the back end, there no Dan Jackson for the first half, no Jonel Aguero in the first half, as both of those players were called for targeting against Texas. How does that affect the back end of the defense? You insert KJ Bolden. I guess you're playing Chris Cole, who's a linebacker, maybe moving him to safety and putting him at the nickel position. Missing two key players there on the back end of your defense for that first half is a factor. But Georgia's has had 2 weeks to prepare for that, so I think that they'll be fine. They've got athletes there that they can plug in and play. But yeah, overall, I think that this defense is really solid. They're as healthy as they've been all season, I would say, and that's really scary for a young quarterback in DJ Lagway this week.
Speaking of, 62.8% completion this season, 1,024 yards, 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. One of the most impressive stats that I saw from, kind of digging into this game and looking at DJ Lagway and his body of work, because obviously, if you've been under a rock or whatever, the other quarterback is medically retired. Graham Cracker Mertz has decided to retire after the knee injury, and I joke, but I hate that, he had to do that. Obviously, I don't wish that upon anybody. And he was kind of the trusty steed, right, for this offense. He was the old trusty steed. Maybe not hitting the big pop plays all the time, but he was your, 74% completion type guy, not going to put the ball in harm's way a whole lot. That's out the window at this point. You've got a first time, I guess it's not his first start, but you get what I'm saying. His first year getting a taste of the starting duties and things like that. DJ Lagway is going to have his plate full, and this is a super athletic guy. He's got about 100 yards rushing, so he does kind of run around. His longest rush of the year is about 22 yards. So he can move around in the pocket, get outside the pocket, and pick up a first down when necessary. I'm interested to see how much Florida's really wanting to do that with this guy, because he goes down, and what's the third option, right? So I'm interested to see Florida's approach to either running DJ or whatnot. But I feel like the offense has been a little bit better as the seasons went on, right? This was an offense that we were kind of looking around saying, all right, where is the playmakers, right? And a big part of the offense runs through the running back room there with Montrezl Harrell, right? That's not the right guy. What's his name? Montrezl Johnson. I'm thinking of a NBA player here. Too many names in my head. He's really the backbone of this offense. Is he healthy enough to go? Is he healthy enough to be 100% in this one? I don't know how many running backs are even 100% at this point in the season, right? So I assume he'll be playing, but what version of him do we get? It's going to be tough to run the football on this this Georgia defense. Let's just be real. Nobody has ran the football to a victory really in years against Georgia. Not just like cram it down Georgia's throat. Alabama did, I guess, in the first half of the game, but they even had to throw it to win it. Even though they got up 35-7 in that game, they had to throw it to win it to beat Georgia. So, what's DJ Lagway able to do through the air? I think that's one of the biggest questions. This team's been pretty explosive through the air, though. Mason, 20th in the country with 32 plays through the passing game of 20-plus yards. That's pretty impressive. The stage is set, though, and these rivalry games are a little bit different. And being at a neutral site, things are going to be a little bit different for DJ Lagway. And something I really pay attention to with the young quarterbacks is road appearances, neutral sites. You just don't have a whole lot of experience going into atmospheres like that. Do we get a pop game from DJ Lagway, or does he get popped by this Georgia defense? I think is a big question. going into this one.
Yeah, and speaking of getting popped, DJ Lagway really hasn't taken many sacks. You look on your screen there; they're seventh in the country in sacks allowed, giving up only 6 sacks so far this year. I think that's really good for offensive line that we had a lot of questions about going into this season. Kind of a depleted unit. I think that that's been the most improved unit for this team just in general, at least in the passing attack. Running the ball, they've been pretty effective. I don't think that that's really the game plan here for this Florida offense. Look, DJ Lagway, I mean, he's a freshman, right? He's going to make mistakes. He's not perfect. Nobody's expecting him to be, but I think if Florida is going to have a chance in this football game, I do think that he needs to be nearly perfect through the air. We saw in the Kentucky game, we saw him make some just scratch your head throws. I mean, just like what? Why are you throwing the ball there? Nobody's open, and one of them led to an interception. But we also saw the brilliance of him, through the passing attack and with his legs in that football game. So what side of DJ Lagway do you get? It's probably going to be a combination of some really good plays that wow you and make you wonder about the Georgia secondary, and then you'll couple that with some knucklehead sort of plays that we typically see freshmen make. But make no doubt about it. I mean, the offense for Florida is going to go with DJ Lagway, and how he performs in this football game. In particular, in the first half, you've got sort of a weak secondary group. That's definitely the I would say the weakness. I would say the hole in Georgia's defense has been in the secondary, particularly the safeties, or excuse me, the cornerbacks have not played particularly well so far this year. Is DJ Lagway the quarterback to exploit those deficiencies against Georgia? I think he can. I think he is going to be a great quarterback at some point. But as of right now, I would say he's probably not that guy. Needs a little bit more game experience. I think he's still catching up to the speed of the game and things like that. But if he goes out and has a great performance, I think that he could put this Georgia defense on skates a little bit and have them wondering, which way is up and which way is down, because he's got that kind of big play potential. They called him Muck Vic for a reason when he was in high school, growing up in that area of Florida that they called the Muck. This guy can do it all. He's an absolute baller. Just not, I don't think that he's experienced enough to really take advantage of, some mistakes that this secondary has been known to give up from time to time in the Georgia defense.
Speaking of defense, let's talk about this Florida defense. This group has left a lot to be desired, Mason. Now, looking at a team at the beginning of the season versus at the end, there's changes that are made. Some are positive. Sometimes you lose players. I think the jury's still out on this defense for the most part, but it's not been great. Look at the numbers. I mean, there's really not anything that you point to that's just been really that good defensively so far for this season. Pass yards per game allowed, 206.6. That's okay, right? That's top 50 in the country. I would consider that to be okay. They've gotten some sacks this year, so have been somewhat decent at being able to get after the quarterback, and shown a bit of a pulse there. Been decent at holding, opponents without getting explosive rush plays, but they've been really, really bad on the back end at giving up big plays. 28 plays this season of 20-plus yards through the air to opponents. That's 100th in the country. You see Tyreek Sapp pictured on your screen there. He's been a kind of a highlight of the defense at the edge position there. 3.5 sacks this season, a forced fumble. Been a nice piece there from Fort Lauderdale. The junior has done a nice job there on the edge. Big edge player there at 272 pounds. It's pretty simple. Can Florida's defense get some turnovers? Can they disrupt Carson Beck? I think Florida, if they have a focused game, I think they can somewhat put a stop to the Georgia run attack. I don't know that Florida is sitting, in Gainesville this week thinking, man, how are we stopping this running attack? I think it's more about how do we disguise some coverages? How do we confuse Carson Beck and continue to benefit off of turnovers like the other teams have that have played Georgia as of late? And then, trust our offense to be able to put some kind of points on the board. I feel like that's got to be kind of your thought process here. I expect Florida to be able, to come after the quarterback in this instance. Georgia's been good at protecting the quarterback, though. So I wouldn't expect them to just send the house or anything like that. This is a tough position, I think, for the Florida defense. And you're going to need your secondary to be all on the same page in this one. It's easier said than done against what I think is a group of wide receivers for Georgia that has high end potential. They're just very inconsistent. They've dropped balls. They've ran the wrong routes at times. How can this Florida defense capitalize off of those kind of cringy moments from the Georgia offense that we've seen throughout the season? I think that's a big question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at this Florida defense, I think that they're playing better than expected going into the season. They gave up 20 points last week against Kentucky, and that was a Kentucky team that was playing from behind for most of that football game. So kind of changed the way that they played on offense. They did score 20 points, giving up only 23 to a Tennessee defense or Tennessee offense that has sputtered at times, in particular in that football game. But I still think that giving up only 23 against Tennessee is a win for that defense. Gave up only 13 to UCF, gave up 28 to Mississippi State, but we've seen Mississippi State kind of become a better offense than we expected. Here recently, gave up 33 to Texas A&M. That's a pretty good offense. They probably weren't that at that point in the season, just week 3 of the season. Only 7 to Samford, and then gave up 41 to Miami, which is obviously the best offense that they've faced all year, probably the best offense they're going to face all year. So, while the production hasn't quite been there, given who they've played on their schedule and the offenses that they played on their schedule, I guess you could say relative to performance, they have been decent, I would say, in comparison to what we kind of where we had them tabbed going into the season. They lost, Princely U off the edge. I think they lost another pass rusher maybe to the NFL. So lost a lot of that sack production that they had in 2023. We knew that would be an issue going into this season, and I think for a rebuilt defense, I think that they're playing pretty well. But pretty well is probably not going to win this football game for Florida. I think that this is a team that's got to be going out there and hunting the football, looking for turnovers, and they're definitely talented enough to do that. And we've seen Carson Beck really in the past few weeks give up a ton of interceptions. Can this defense force turnovers, get some sacks, and make this a football game? That's kind of the question for me.
It's prediction time, man. The line on this was 16, right? For Georgia.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that line is just, I think it's spot on, man. I think 34-17 is the outcome here. I think Georgia wins this thing 34-17. That would be a slight Georgia cover. Not a game that I'm itching to bet on, right? Especially with the fact that Georgia's missing such key players in the secondary. I mean, Dan Jackson, for as much shit as he's caught from me over the last couple of years, he's played his ass off this year, man. And he's played really well. And every time you need somebody to fly in and stick their nose in there, Dan Jackson's been that guy. So who's going to step up and do that this week? Because I think you're going to see a good performance from Florida. I think you'll see a decent performance, at least in the first half. And I think we see Georgia come out in the second half and do what they've done pretty much for most of Kirby Smart's tenure, right? Which is make adjustments at halftime and come out and shut teams down in the second half and go on drives and score touchdowns when they need to. This isn't a prolific Georgia offense. I'm interested to see what adjustments are made this week and if they can grow again this week. We talked about it this week. I kind of put it in this frame of mind. I feel like Georgia's offense is where they should be in like week 4 of a season, and here we are in week 10. Can they continue to grow? And maybe they can take a couple of steps in the right direction. That'll be something to really look out for this week. What's your prediction on this one? I've got Georgia winning, covering that 16-point spread, 34-17. And I'm pretty sure that would put the over-under right about the same as that as well. I'm not that good at math. What are your thoughts?
I would say the over is probably more likely to hit here. 52 just seems pretty low for this Georgia offense that has a lot of explosivity, and you couple that with Florida's offense that with DJ Lagway also has a propensity for these explosive plays, and I think that the over probably is the safest bet here. But what I'm curious to see is what kind of game do we get? Is this going to be another sloppy game like the Texas game was, where both teams are just turning the ball over left and right? Or do we get a nice clean game with 1 or 2 turnovers throughout the football game where we can really accurately predict what the final score is going to be? Because I do think that 34-17 is what it would be in sort of a clean game there. But if this thing gets sloppy, then the under is has a lot of potential to hit as well. I think honestly, from a betting angle, I think the first half. I think that Florida can cover in the first half if it's 8 points or 8.5 points or something like that. I would like Florida there to cover in that first half. We've seen Georgia struggle in that first half in particular, knowing that they've got a couple players out on defense. For the bettors out there, I think that's probably the safest play. We'll have to see tomorrow if we can find a line on that and whether or not I take that. That being said, I'm kind of leaning Florida and the points here. I do feel like this could be sort of a letdown performance by Georgia, still figuring some things out on offense. Maybe they try to get the running game more involved this week, and we see some more, run pass from Mike Bobo like we've seen in years past, and maybe Florida's able to kind of step up and stop some of those plays, and we see the Georgia run game continue to sputter here. But I would stay away from the line, to be honest with you. I think Georgia wins, no doubt. But this could be another one of those, second half games by Georgia where they just come out in the second half and maybe Florida puts up a goose egg in the second half and Georgia's able to come back and win and potentially even cover at that point. But give me Georgia to win. Stay away from the line, y'all. Look at the over under more, maybe some first half sort of odds there as well.
Go Dogs. Guys, that's it. Thank y'all. I certainly do appreciate you tuning in. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. If you're still watching, hit the like button. Thank you so much for joining us. That's all the big matchups for this week. We've done the big matchups. We've done the little matchups. We've done about 9 of them. If there's something else that you want to hear about, a game we haven't talked about, tomorrow would be a good chance to do that. We've got Between the Lines coming up tomorrow. You're more than welcome to come in the comment section tomorrow, throw that thing in there in the live chat. We'll talk about it if we don't already talk about it on the betting show. Thank y'all again so much for tuning in. Certainly appreciate it. It's been another awesome week here at First and Long College Football Show. All that's left to do is place our bets and watch some football. Thank y'all so much. Happy Halloween. Everybody stay safe out there, and we'll see you this weekend, and we'll see you tomorrow on the betting show.